Well, what do you know? Another dead Volkswagen part. Today we have a 6-speed DSG out of an Audi that allegedly the driver hit something on the highway and continued to drive until the car stopped. So in this video we are going to be breaking down this DSG, talking about how it works, check out the carnage inside, and see if maybe we can even fix it. Also, before we get going, anybody want to have a guess at what a new DSG is going to cost? Throw your best guess down in the comments. Now the DSG might seem like a super over-engineered, complicated thing. However, it really isn't, but it also kind of is. The easiest way to think of a DSG is as an automatically controlled manual transmission. You'll see in a minute, the insides look just like a manual transmission, but we have a bunch of electronicals right here on the front that control all of that. This transmission did come out of a 3.2 liter car that was also a Quattro. This spot right here is where the bevel box would bolt on. That would then send power to the prop shaft and then back to the rear wheels. Here's what a manual transmission looks like with the bevel box bolted on. You can see that thing sticking off the side. The transmission is positioned in the car just like this, if I were the one behind the wheel. This is where our Mechatronics unit lives, the brains of the operation, and this faces the front of the car. Then our engine bolts up right here, and then this would be on the right side of the car. Also worth noting, if you ever have to take one of these out, there is a hidden bolt behind the starter, which the starter would live right here. We have our trans cooler right here on the top, and then this right here is where our filter lives. Oh, and as you can see down here at the bottom, this is where our hole's at, where all the juice is juiced out. Now I picked this DSG up from my buddy Zeke. I just picked up a ton of garbage that day when we grabbed that VR6 GTI with the dead engine. There are only a couple of common failures on these things, excluding outside influence like this one had. Mechatronic unit failure is common, clutch pack failure is common. The gears themselves generally hold up pretty well, and unfortunately, there's really not a lot of repairs that you can make with factory parts. The Mechatronic unit is one, the clutch pack is one, and then the entire box is another one. Now, allegedly, this car was driven until it didn't go no-mo. Also, stick around to the end, because we're gonna talk about why it's probably really stupid for a shop to try and fix this rather than just replacing it. Let's go ahead and start getting this thing apart, though. We'll get our cooler off. I'm expecting this to kind of be dry as a bone here. Let's go ahead and get our filter next. These do have a service interval of 40,000 miles every 40K. Super easy to do. I think I've done a video on that. I'll try and link it up for you. It's pretty straightforward. Dry as a bone. Here's our filter. This is the older paper style filter. I don't see anything. There's a little bit of fluid in the hole, but nothing noteworthy on the filter. I was kind of hoping for it to be full of metal. Metal Gear Solid. On the back side, this is where our diff is gonna live. Our axle cup, I've already undone that. That to the side. Next up, let's get our clutch pack out and see what we got behind here. This is actually the part that attaches to a dual mass flywheel. You can see it's splined right here. The dual mass flywheel is what bolts to the engine, and this functions kind of similar to how a manual transmission clutch would, but also not really at all. There's a ring around the outside that we need to take off that holds the plate on. This transmission is normally serviced with this part facing up. There we go. Oh geez, oh geez. And we're leaking. I was hoping all the fluid would be out. No such luck. No matter how hard you try, there's always gonna be fluid. This is our clutch pack right here. Oh, it stinks. Oh, it smells like a burnt clutch. Spring clip, get that guy out of the way. There's actually two clutches in here, hence the name, dual clutch. So here's our plate. There's also a bearing inside of here. This shaft actually runs through the entire transmission and drives the oil pump. So I'm gonna set this aside for now. I've actually never seen one of those fail. We have one more circlip we're gonna need to remove. Now we should be able to pull our whole clutch stack out. Now you can see we got all of our output shaft bearings and stuff like that. I see one more circlip, and since I'm right here, I'm gonna go ahead and take this out as well. For our clutch pack, this is a serviceable part from VW. You can get the whole kit and caboodle. I think there's also actually aftermarket ones where if you're adding a bunch of power to your car or something, you can get two. We have our clip. These guys do hold up pretty well though. We'll move this piece. Ooh, oh, it stinks. It's also burnt. Look at how burnt that is. We have an inner clutch. Oh man, that's burnt too. And some, whatever that is. I don't even know what that is. So we have an outer clutch and an inner clutch. Our inner clutch is the K2 clutch and our outer clutch is the K1 clutch. I'm expecting these to be completely burnt. We're gonna commit the cardinal sin. So this is just baskets, right? Functions very similar to how any of these kind of packs function, like the all-wheel drive, the Haldex or Borg Warner. So here's our clutches. These are upside down. Some discoloration on it, but overall, not too bad. It's when we get to the friction material that these are pretty worn out and they're very dark. Normally they're kind of a bright yellowish. And then as we move further in, the metal discs get darker and darker. And that's our K1 clutch. Oh yeah, this one's super sad. Let's see how our inner clutch looks like. This one's much worse. Look at that. It's like black. It should be shiny silver and it's black. Oh man, look at this. This is a friction disc. If you look at this one, you can see all those little lines on it. This one has none of that. Completely smoked. Makes you wonder if we put clutches in this, if it would actually drive. The fluid starvation caused this. Man, these are toast. This is real similar to what happened with the S4. Is it reasonable that we could have put clutches in this transmission and it drove? Possibly. However, there's still a hole in the case. And I actually don't think you can get a case for that, but maybe some JB Weld would have taken care of it. But these things, this K2 clutch is just, ugh. Smoke City, USA. Anyway, cool stuff. Never seen one of these clutches that bad before. Behind this cover is where the brains of the operation live. And according to Zeke, this one actually had a United Motorsports tune on it, which is kind of cool. Out of all the issues with this DSG box, Mechatronics unit, most common hands down. In fact, these were actually recalled on a ton of cars. All right. Oh, well, there's no metal in the pan. That's good. Doesn't quite smell as bad as cooked gear oil, but man, oh man, does it stank. So here's the brains of the operation, a series of solenoids used to control the transmission. I'm gonna take this out, the mech unit, and then we'll come back and take it apart. I don't know that I've ever actually taken one of these apart. I do know Volkswagen didn't really have any repair for the mech unit itself, but I have found aftermarket solenoids. I've never done that, so I can't speak to whether it's a good idea or not, but from the factory, you gotta buy a whole unit. If you were replacing this, there is a specific torque sequence you'd want to follow. Don't just zing all your bolts out like I'm doing. Probably also taking more bolts out than I actually need to. If you're DIYing one of these, I should do a video on how to do this. You need to pull this unit straight out. If you rock it, you're gonna end up breaking that little arm thingy sticking out, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. Now this unit might actually still be good. I worry about it running out of fluid, so we're not gonna do anything about it, but it might actually still be good. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set this to the side and decide where the teardown of this is gonna happen in the video. So with our mech unit out of the way, you can see all these oil passages through here as well as the bolt holes where the mech unit bolts onto. If I spin this around, this is a cover that covers up our transmission pump. I actually don't think I've ever seen one of these fail. I'm sure they have, I just don't think I've seen one. There was a time the repair manual actually called for you to pull this cover off when you were doing a Mechatronics unit. It's been a long time since I've looked up the OE procedure for that. Here's our pump right here. Our pump is driven by that long shaft that I pulled out from the front. What size is that? It looks like a T30 to me. Let's go ahead and take it off. There's one that's different. We're using the Poly D ball end special to get this out. It always bothers me when one is different. I'm sure there's reasons. Thanks, engineers. Here's our pump. I think we should take it apart. Why not? We're this far. Be interesting to see if there's any carnage. I don't think so. So this is how this pump pumps fluid. So as you spin, that just creates fluid pressure. Technically though, you were supposed to pull this cover off in order to do the Mechatronics unit, and here's why. I'll show you that arm that I made kind of a big stink about, goes through and clips in right here. So you could still get it out without taking this cover off, but repair manual wanted you to pull this cover off, and then this is a speed sensor right here, and then the speed sensor pickup is right here. The transmission, because it's actually pretty smart, wants to know how fast all the gears are turning at all times. And so they're speed sensors for pretty much everything. I'm gonna also pull this clip off here while we're here. Okay, next up is going to be separating our two case halves. There's a bunch of bolts that hold all this together, so I'm gonna zing all these out in hopefully a cool, fast manner. Then once I get all the bolts out, we'll stand it up and separate the two halves. We might also have to heat it up too. I'm not really sure on this one. No matter how much fluid comes out on the highway while you're driving, there's always gonna be some fluid left. Feels like I still got something holding tight, like a bolt or perhaps one of these shafts. Starting to think I got another bolt that I missed. Oh, I did. I missed one more. Hey, that's better. Oh, looks like I might have to take that off too. This is one of those jobs where like you know how to take all the stuff apart, but you don't do it enough to be just like autopilot on it. So it's like, oh dang, I forgot that. Oh dang, I forgot that. Most of the time, this is just a box swap. You know, if we're honest, the days of fixing a lot of this stuff are super long gone. Now, hopefully, that is it. There we go. Just gotta wiggle it the right way. Here it is, our electronically controlled manual transmission. We have our diff here, we have our 2 output shafts, and our input shaft is this one right here. And basically, it's exactly the same as a transmission you would shift yourself. You have your shift forks, you have synchronizers. First gear, second gear, and third gear are 3-piece synchronizers. The other 3 gears are just normal, like 1-piece synchronizers. Now the transmission needs to be able to shift into and out of gear. So on each side of the transmission case, there's a piston that can move the shift solenoid. Down here at the bottom, this part right here is a piston that can push it up. But we need to be able to get it out of gear. So if I had the other case half on, you would see the same kind of piston as there is right down here up at the top. And fluid pressure will push that and push it out of gear. Now, there's also speed sensors. This is a speed sensor right here because it needs to know how fast these gears are turning. But otherwise, that's basically it. Now, I'd like to actually take the gears out and show you guys each individual gear stack and how they work. It's tricky on this transmission to do without puking all the gears out. But let me see if I can do it. Let's see. Do I have the power? We're here for the destruction. Catastrophic destruction. There we go. Everybody stay there. Here's our case. Here's our parking lock right here. So this slides down and locks into a place on the diff. You can kind of see it right here. That's why when you put a DSG in park, it rolls forward or backward just a little bit. Here's where our pistons live, right here, right here, and right here, to shift our selectrons. This is our fill tube to set the level proper. And we have a series of needle bearings and bearing races and things like that. That's not to say that it's not complicated. I guess that is exactly to say that it's not complicated. What I mean by basic is it's essentially just like a manual transmission. Okay, let's unwind this disaster. We're gonna start with the diff, right? Standard differential, open diff. This back bearing here is a little dark, so it's gotten some heat on it for sure. I probably wouldn't reuse this diff in any capacity. For the rest of it, this is actually a good way to look at our gear sets. This is our input shaft. Power from our engine comes through to this shaft. Bearing at the top, this essentially connects to, this goes here, outer clutch basket, that splines to it, and the inner one, which I should have put on first. For reverse, we need the diff to go the opposite way. So we have what's called a reverse idler, which is right here. That connects to reverse and goes backwards. These 2 gears are where the magic happens. So this is going to be first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. The beauty of these being on 2 separate oops, is that you can actually engage 2 gears at the same time. Just one's not basically locked in, sending power to the diff. That's why these shift so fast, is that you're almost in 2 gears at the same time. So how does our power transfer through our transmission? Comes in through our input shaft, which is tied to both shafts. This gear spins independent from this shaft. So everything's kind of always rotating inside a manual transmission. It's just how fast and what is locked. When it's time to engage reverse, push the clutch in, engage reverse. Or in this case, we put our foot on the brake and put it in R. When we move the sleeve and lock the gear, this is now held, it essentially makes this gear locked to the whole entire shaft. Now the transfer of energy is gonna go to this gear. For this one, there is actually another bit involved because we gotta go the other way, right? For reverse, we gotta have a third gear. So we could actually take this whole shaft apart. Maybe we can just take one apart. Snap ring holds it in. Sometimes these are pressed, sometimes not. Yeah, I think we'd have to probably break the press out. Now we're just making a mess here. So here's the brains of our DSG, our Mechatronics unit. Full of solenoids, full of pressure sensors and whatnot. Our barrel connector right here is where it connects to the car. Now, a common-ish issue is the barrel connector coming loose, causing all kinds of random problems. So if you're having random problems, make sure this is locked into place. We're gonna start by taking the back side off first, because I think that's gonna make easier doing the rest. Also, test driving my brand new Milwaukee Impact. Look at this little guy. Not a Milwaukee commercial, but how about this? My favorite part, they moved the lights to a place that's actually valuable instead of down here where you couldn't see anything. Now at the dealer level, this would never happen. Believe it or not, there is nothing in the repair manual about taking these apart. So this plastic bit right here is actually our wiring harness. Kind of like on the S4 where that's a super common problem. We have this plastic array wiring harness. We'll get this out of the way. This exposes all of our solenoids. Let's take a couple of these off. All this does is move fluid. There's this little plastic gasket part that has a screen in it. So maybe a potential failure point would be this getting clogged up. Let's start taking some of these other ones off. We're gonna get to the root of the problem. The root of the problem, I guess, was the hole in the case. These last two that I just took off, they got a little ball in there. That should be for fluid control. From here, this is very similar to an automatic transmission valve body. Let's go ahead and get the rest of our moment of truth. There we go. All of our fluid passages for our Mechatronics unit. Whenever fluid is moved, it's moved, held, applied, and controlled here. This might be a disaster, but that's okay. It should be this gasket. We can take this plate off. There we go. Here's our corresponding passages on this side, and then this covers it up so that it can only go through certain spots. Very similar to an automatic transmission valve body. Springs, little balls, little tiny balls, right, like that ball's right there. You got pressure sensors, all kinds of cool stuff in here. I mean, it's definitely not meant to come off, right? Even if you rebuilt that and cleaned like all the yuck out, this stuff's not really meant to come apart. It's probably like epoxied on, but how cool is this? It's like a maze. Now that we have the case apart too, something cool is there's actually a filter inside of this transmission. The funny part, I'm pretty sure it's not a serviceable part. I don't think you can actually get one from Volkswagen. You can also see there's some more cooling, lubricating passages back here, but this filter, what's funny is right at the other end of this filter, right here, is exactly where the hole was. I have never replaced one of these. Made in Germany. It has a part number on it. Maybe we'll look and see if we can find one. It's probably a common part number for another transmission as well. But either way, you're probably not gonna ever replace one of these. Clearly some super sadness from our DSG box, especially this K2 clutch that bore the brunt of not having any fluid on it. The big question, why wouldn't a shop try and fix this? Couldn't you have just put a couple of clutches in it, patched up that hole, and sent it down the road? Well, the answer is yes, you could have done that. In fact, I would probably go out on a limb and say some JB Weld probably would have sealed the box up. Here's the problem. A junkyard box is $400. The parts alone for this clutch pack is gonna be more expensive than that. The bigger issue is doing any of that is a complete gamble. As a shop, if you take that trans out, throw clutches in it, put it back in, even fixing the hole, the odds of something else being wrong are pretty high. Now, we have the advantage of being able to take our time and take this apart and not having to put it back together. It's really hard to justify to a customer paying quite a bit more money to make a repair than slapping a used box in it. So I think he made the right call, and man, first of all, these stink. Second of all, they're not supposed to look like this. They are supposed to be bright and shiny silver. Hold on, I'll show you what they should look like. This is kind of what they should look like, and this is what these look like. They are super sad. Here's the two clutches side by side. So I'm gonna wrap it up there. I'd love to know from you guys, what else should we try and tear down? Should I find more transmissions that are sad, other engines? This kind of stuff is super fun, and I enjoy doing it. With that, I'm out. Have an awesome day, and I'll talk to you again next time.